learning SQL is easy, but you gotta have data to do it. While the tutorials on, in this case, W3 School's SQL site are great, they have tried examples that allow you to run SQL, it's not your own data. The best way to really learn SQL is to get your own data and play with it. Let's do that now using Microsoft Access, and in this case, we're going to use the City of Toronto's Open Data Portal. Particularly, I'm going to download parking tickets from a year. And if you go and explore the data, you can download this data and be able to grab it. In this case, the data has been downloaded, and you can see if I extracted the zip file, it's a whole bunch of CSV files. I always recommend taking a look at the data first just to understand what it is. That way you can have a better understanding of how to import it somewhere else. As well, their website does have a README file which you can go through to learn about the fields. But I'm just going to poke my head in using my next favorite tool, which is Notepad++. So this tool is just basically a really enhanced text editor that allows me to actually go and use the data. And I can take a look at the data and see what it is. A CSV file is just comma separated file. And you can see here are all the different column names, and then related to each, because it's comma delimited, you have the entry associated with it. So the first one is tag number masked, the next one is date of infraction and infraction code. Tag number masked, date of infraction, infraction code. So now that we have a basic understanding of this data, let's get it into Microsoft Access. So inside of Microsoft Access, I've created a new database, and I've canceled out of creating the table. And what we're going to do is just simply go grab the external data, and we want to get it from a new file source that is a file, and it will be a text file. So in this dialog, I'm just going to go browse, and then I'm going to select, in this case, 000 from the file series. And I'm going to import the source. It's going to be delimited. We know that because it's comma delimited. That's what CSV means. It's comma delimited, and the first row contains field names. There is no text qualifier. I can go through then and just make sure all the data types are correct. This is just basically how the data will be stored inside of this table once it's created. So it's a good idea to go through every single one and just make sure they're correct. I've already done that, and they are. And I'll let Access add a primary key. It's always good to have a primary key on every single table. And now we'll name it something appropriate. So let's call it parking tags, and we'll hit finish. And then it goes through and reads all the data, imports it into the Access database, and now we have it saved, and we can see it's right here. So parking tags has been imported, at least the first file. I can open that up, and I can see there's 249,000 different records, which if we go back to our file here, because that first row of this text file is the field names, if we go right down to the bottom, we can verify we got them all. Yeah, 250,000 entered, lines rather, and obviously the first line being a field name, that means there's 249,999 records. So we're good. That's awesome. So the next thing we can do is continuing to import all the data, because this is only a small portion of it. All the data you can see are in these 8 different files starting with 000. So the next file would be this one. We have to do a slightly different way to import it. The way we're going to do that, same idea though. So from file, text file, we're going to go pick the first file, but this time we're not going to import the source into a new table, but we're going to append a copy of the records to the existing table. Because it uses the same data structure, we can just keep loading the data into it. We'll say OK. Yeah, well, it'll close the item. It's delimited, so we have to go pick all the same settings, comma, delimited, no text qualifier. The only difference now is it's not going to give us a name. It's going to import it to this table, and we can hit finish. And it goes ahead and finishes the import. And this import is working well because we're not getting an errors table. If you get an import errors table, that means some of the data did not get imported. And likely you need to go back, check all your field types and settings to make sure that they are appropriate for the data being loaded, fix it, then start again. So keep doing that for each individual file, and then you'll have all of your data loaded into Microsoft Access. And from there, you can start doing queries and other things. Now, before I let you go, let me just go through some of these other settings just in case they're applicable for what you're doing. So fixed width are when all of this looks lined up, even as a text file. So right now you don't see that. You can see that this is comma separated. So that does not make sense to be fixed width. In delimited, you can have tab, semicolon, comma, space, or you can pick any character you want as the delimitation. And you can see this little preview will show you if you have it right or wrong. So obviously comma makes the most sense here. The second thing is the first row contains field names, and typically, again, you can see that because the first row looks very different than the other rows in the file. And there you go. So that would be the field names versus the actual data within it. And then finally, the text qualifier, typically it's a double quote. Basically, that means if some text inside of here has quotes around it, it should be treated in that field. Most common, if data has a comma in it and you're using a comma separation, it'll get confused. And what will happen is it'll split this column even though it shouldn't have. And they use a text qualifier around the text. So if you see a whole bunch of your field data with quotes around it, then likely the text qualifier needs to be selected to make sure that it gets imported correctly. And those are the basic settings of the import text wizard inside of MS Access. Once you've loaded all your data, you should be able to see all of the data loaded, and you can double check to make sure it has the right number of records as well, and all the data looks correct. Just do a very quick scan of the table to make sure it's right. And another setting inside of Access is using these little bars here. You can actually go next record. You can jump right down to the end. And you can also jump to a new blank record. This allows you to enter data. In this case, I'm not entering data. I just want to play with the parking tags data. But now you have new data loaded that represents something in the real world that you can play with. And in this case, you can start building your own SQL queries, testing out and finding out about how parking tickets are issued. Thank you.